Remember when a mechanical shark made an entire generation afraid to go in the water? The summer of 1975 gave us Steven Spielberg's Jaws, a film that turned Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss into household names. We remember Chief Brody patrolling the beaches of Amity Island, Quint's chalkboard screech, and that unforgettable Indianapolis speech, Hooper descending into the dark, and that simple, two-note theme. We remember the yellow barrels racing across the surface, the iconic line about needing a bigger boat, and the explosive finale. But what we don't remember is how close this came to disaster. Spielberg's second theatrical film ran 104 days over schedule, nearly tripled its budget, and featured a mechanical shark, so unreliable the crew nicknamed the production flaws. The film's most celebrated quality, that Hitchcockian restraint and terror of what you don't see, was never part of the plan. Today, we're counting down 15 weird facts you never knew about Jaws. Stick around for number 1, because a $250,000 mechanical failure accidentally invented the way modern thrillers are made. If you're new here, this is where we dig into the stories behind the movies you love, the ones the studios don't put on the poster. If you're into behind-the-scenes chaos, happy accidents, and Hollywood weirdness, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps more than you think. Number 15. You know the scene. Quint crushes a Narragansett beer can with one hand to intimidate Hooper, and Hooper fires back by daintily crushing a styrofoam cup. It's a perfect character moment that captures their entire dynamic in about 5 seconds. Turns out, that scene was lifted directly from what Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss were actually doing to each other off camera. Spielberg told Entertainment Weekly they started adding scenes based on how the two actors behaved behind the scenes. The styrofoam cup squeeze, in response to the beer can crush, was something that actually happened during downtime. Even the beer brand was chosen for authenticity. Spielberg asked local Martha's Vineyard fishermen what they actually drank, and they pointed him to Narragansett. Here's something most people don't realize. Beer cans in 1975 were made of thick steel, not the thin aluminum we have today. Shaw's one-handed crush was a genuine display of physical strength, not a camera trick or a pre-crushed prop. The moment works so well because it captures the real competitive tension between two actors who genuinely got under each other's skin. When you watch that scene now, you're seeing Quint and Hooper, but you're also seeing Shaw and Dreyfuss channeling their actual relationship into the performance. That little detail sets up something much bigger that was happening throughout the entire production, a genuine feud that Spielberg would eventually weaponize for the camera. Number 14. The opening scene of Jaws is still one of the most terrifying sequences in cinema history. Chrissy Watkins goes for a midnight swim and gets violently yanked through the water by an unseen force. What most viewers don't know is that terrifying scene was achieved without any shark footage whatsoever, and the actress was genuinely injured during filming. Susan Backlinie wore an orange U-shaped life preserver around her legs that was connected by cable to a concrete block on the ocean floor roughly 100 yards away. 6 to 8 crew members ran up and down the beach pulling that cable to drag her through the water. Spielberg himself personally operated a second cable attached to her stomach, controlling the initial violent jerk downward. During one take, both cables pulled simultaneously with full force, and the impact broke some of Backlinie's ribs. Sound editor Jim Troutman later confirmed what happened. He said she screamed, and when she screamed, she went underwater. She was hurting, absolutely hurting, and they went with the take that really hurt her. That's the one that made it into the picture. The terror you see on screen isn't just great acting, it's partly genuine pain. When you watch that opening now, you realize those aren't just performed screams. The scene established that this production was willing to push physical limits for authenticity and set a brutal tone for one of the most punishing shoots in Hollywood history. Number 13. There's a moment on the beach when Chief Brody realizes a shark is attacking in the crowded water. The camera does something disorienting. Brody stays exactly the same size in frame, but the background behind him stretches away as if the world is warping around him. It's a visceral representation of horrified realization, and it's now universally called the Jaws effect. That technique is a dolly zoom. The camera physically moves toward Roy Scheider on a dolly track while the lens simultaneously zooms out, creating a visual paradox that captures internal panic through pure cinematography. Spielberg didn't invent this technique. It was first created by Paramount cameraman Erman Roberts for Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo back in 1958, and developing it cost roughly $20,000 for that production. Cinematographer Bill Butler executed it perfectly for Spielberg during the Alex Kintner beach attack scene. The technique has since been replicated in Goodfellas, The Lord of the Rings, and Poltergeist, but it's still called the Jaws effect because this is the film that made it iconic. What makes it so effective is that it captures horrified realization using nothing but visual language. No dialogue, no music cue, no shot of the shark, just a camera trick that makes your stomach drop. When you watch that moment now, you're seeing Spielberg borrow directly from Hitchcock's playbook, taking an expensive innovation from 17 years earlier and turning it into one of his signature moments. Number 12. Roy Scheider's most famous line from Jaws is ranked number 35 on the American Film Institute's list of all-time greatest movie quotes. What makes that remarkable is that the line never appeared in any version of the script. It started as an inside joke, and it wasn't even a joke about the shark. The entire production ran on equipment and catering that were hauled out on a barge the crew nicknamed the SS Garbage Sale. That barge was towed by a support boat that was absurdly comically small for the job it was doing. Every time something went wrong on set, and things went wrong constantly, the crew would sarcastically mutter the phrase at producers Richard Zanuck and David Brown. Late lunch delivery? You're gonna need a bigger boat. Rough seas swamping equipment? You're gonna need a bigger boat. It became the unofficial motto of a production that felt underfunded and overwhelmed. Roy Scheider loved the joke so much, he started improvising it into takes during different scenes. Screenwriter Carl Gottlieb confirmed that the version that made the final cut, when Brody gets his first real look at the shark while chumming, was kept specifically because of its perfect comic timing. Editor Verna Fields shaped that moment in the editing room, and it became the most quotable line in the film. When you hear it now, you're hearing cinema's most beloved improvisation, rooted in the crew's genuine frustration with how the production was being run. Number 11. Robert Shaw's performance as Quint is one of the most iconic character creations in film history, and a lot of credit goes to a real person who happened to be on set every day. Shaw based his performance partly on Craig Kingsbury, a Martha's Vineyard fisherman, farmer, and self-described legendary eccentric who also appeared in the film as Ben Gardner. Spielberg later described Kingsbury as the purest version of who Quint was in his mind, the real embodiment of that weathered, obsessive shark hunter archetype. Some of Kingsbury's actual speech patterns and specific phrases were incorporated directly into the screenplay as Shaw spent time with him. Shaw also improvised a rhyme about Mary Lee during the boat scenes. Empire magazine later confirmed that was something Shaw recalled from a gravestone he'd once seen in Ireland, a small personal detail that added unexpected texture. These little additions gave Quint a lived-in authenticity that no amount of pure imagination could have manufactured. The character wasn't just written and performed. He was partly built from observing a real person who embodied that world. When you watch Quint now, you're seeing a performance constructed from reality layered on top of fiction. It's one thing to play a role. It's another thing entirely to absorb the mannerisms and soul of someone standing right next to you and channel that into the camera. Number 10. Let's talk about Bruce, the mechanical nightmare that nearly destroyed this entire production. 3 full-size, 25-foot pneumatic sharks were built over 5 months in Sun Valley, California, by special effects veteran Bob Matty. This was the same man who had constructed the giant squid for Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The sharks were designed by production designer Joe Alves, and each one contained roughly 500 feet of plastic tubing, 25 remote-controlled valves, and 20 hoses. They required 14 operators to function properly. During testing in California, the sharks performed flawlessly in the freshwater tanks. Then, the sharks were shipped across the country to Martha's Vineyard and lowered into the Atlantic Ocean for the first time. The first shark sank straight to the bottom like a stone. Nobody had bothered to test them in saltwater. The oversight was staggering. Saltwater corrosion was catastrophic and immediate. Hoses burst, motors eroded, the skin bloated and distorted, the eyes crossed, and the jaws refused to close on cue. Repairs cost roughly $50,000 per major breakdown, and breakdowns were constant. Effects artist Roy Arbogast essentially became the shark's full-time makeup artist and mechanic. Spielberg, watching his centerpiece prop fail over and over, started calling his creation the Great White Turd. When you watch Jaws now and wonder why the shark appears so rarely on screen, this is why. It wasn't an artistic choice, it was damage control. Number 9. The production of Jaws was originally budgeted at $3.5 million over 55 days of filming, beginning on May 2nd, 1974. Universal Studios wanted everything wrapped by late June to avoid a potential Screen Actors Guild strike. That was the plan. Instead, filming stretched to 159 days, and the budget ballooned to roughly $9 million. Nearly triple the time, nearly triple the cost. The crew's morale completely cratered as weeks turned into months of grueling ocean work. Production designer Joe Alves said it was almost mutiny. Angry locals started leaving dead sharks on the production office porch as a message. Universal chief Sid Sheinberg visited the set personally and offered Spielberg a way out. He told him that if he wanted to quit right then, they would find a way to make their money back. Spielberg stayed, but the tension never let up. On the final night of shooting in October 1974, the cast staged a massive food fight after Roy Scheider dumped fruit cocktail over Spielberg's head. The next morning, Spielberg showed up dressed in leather and suede because he was genuinely terrified the crew was planning to throw him overboard. He checked his last shot through the viewfinder, then immediately leapt onto a waiting speedboat and shouted back to shore, "I shall not return." The film went on to gross $470 million worldwide. Number 8. Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss started off on good terms. Dreyfuss had attended one of Shaw's stage performances as Claudius and went backstage afterward to tell him how brilliant it was. Shaw warmly invited him in for a drink, and they bonded. That warmth didn't last. Once production started, Shaw relentlessly mocked Dreyfuss on set in ways that went far beyond playful teasing. Roy Scheider later recalled Shaw saying things like, "Look at you, Dreyfuss. You eat and you drink and you're fat and you're sloppy." Shaw once dared Dreyfuss to climb the Orca's mast and jump into the ocean for $100. He even fired a fire extinguisher directly at Dreyfuss's face during a take. The breaking point came when Shaw walked down the gangplank holding a bourbon bottle and shot glass, asking Dreyfuss for help with something. Dreyfuss said, "Sure, I'll help you," then immediately hurled the shot glass into the sea. Spielberg later called it the shot heard around the world. Spielberg recognized exactly what that friction was doing to their performances. He said it got ugly, but it was Quint and Hooper living out that relationship on screen. He weaponized their real animosity and let it bleed into the characters. In 2014, Dreyfuss met Shaw's granddaughter on Ireland's Late Late Show and was moved to tears talking about it. When you watch Quint and Hooper's conflict now, you're seeing real actors channeling genuine dislike into dramatic gold. Alright, we're at the halfway mark, and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 7, I want to hear from you. What's your favorite Jaws quote or moment? Drop it in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Number 7. Cinematographer Bill Butler was solving problems on Jaws that had literally never existed before in film history, because no major Hollywood production had ever attempted to shoot extensively on the open ocean. When a camera sank into the Atlantic during a storm with exposed film still inside, most people would have assumed that footage was gone forever. Butler didn't. He did some quick mental chemistry and realized that seawater has a chemical composition similar to the saline-based solutions used in film developing. So he packed the exposed film in a bucket of water, got on a plane to New York, and had it developed immediately. They didn't lose a single foot of footage. Butler also pioneered a waterproof floating camera housing he called a water box, inspired by cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond's work on Deliverance. It placed the lens just above the waterline, psychologically putting audiences at the shark's eye level. When Panavision introduced its new lightweight Panaflex camera, Butler showed Spielberg that he could brace it handheld against his body and absorb the boat's rolling motion with his knees. As a result, roughly 90% of the orca scenes were shot handheld, giving those sequences their visceral, unstable energy. Spielberg later wrote Butler a letter thanking him, saying, "You were the calm before, during, and after every storm on the set of Jaws." Number 6. After principal photography wrapped and Spielberg thought he was done, he watched early cuts of the film and decided he needed one more scream. The original version of the scene where Hooper discovers Ben Gardner's body underwater just wasn't frightening enough. It played flat. Universal refused to pay for any additional shooting because the production had already gone so far over budget. So Spielberg spent $3,000 of his own money to reshoot the scene himself. The new version was filmed in editor Verna Fields' backyard swimming pool in Encino, California. They built a partial boat hull, placed a latex life cast of actor Craig Kingsbury's severed head inside it, and then had to figure out how to simulate the murky underwater visibility of Martha's Vineyard. The solution was simple and brilliant. They poured powdered milk into the pool and covered it with a black tarp to block out sunlight. The result became one of the most iconic jump scares in horror cinema history. At test screenings, the severed head provoked louder screams than the shark's first full appearance. That single moment taught Spielberg a foundational lesson about the power of suggestion that would shape his entire career. When you watch the Ben Gardner scene now, you're watching the most effective scare in the entire film, and it was shot in a suburban swimming pool for pocket change. Number 5. John Williams invited Steven Spielberg to his home to preview the musical score he had composed for Jaws. Spielberg walked in expecting something weird and melodic, something tonal but eerie that would underscore the shark's presence. Williams sat down at the piano, visibly excited about what he was about to share, and played 2 notes on the lower keys using just 2 fingers. Dun dun, dun dun, dun dun. Spielberg burst out laughing. He genuinely thought Williams was teasing him as a joke, showing him a funny little warm-up before revealing the real music. Spielberg later said he thought, "Oh, this is a new side of Johnny. He's never teased me before like this." He was waiting for Williams to say, "No, but seriously, here's the actual theme." Williams kept a completely straight face and said, "I'm serious. I'm serious." Spielberg asked him to play it again, and on the second listen, his entire perspective transformed. He realized it suddenly seemed right. Williams later described the motif as something that grinds away at you, just as a shark would do. Instinctual, relentless, unstoppable. He deliberately made it brainless, like the shark itself. Spielberg has said many times since that he believes the film would have been only half as successful without that score. John Williams won the Academy Award for Best Original Score. When you hear that iconic theme now, you're hearing the composer's simplest idea, initially mistaken for a joke. Number 4. The USS Indianapolis monologue is widely considered one of the greatest scenes in film history, and its exact authorship remains disputed 5 decades later. Playwright Howard Sackler, who was a Navy veteran, conceived the idea and wrote roughly 2 pages introducing Quint's backstory. Spielberg sent that material to screenwriter John Milius, who dictated an expanded 8 to 10 page version. Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, the future Back to the Future writing team, also took a crack at it. Then Robert Shaw, who was himself a published novelist and playwright, took every version anyone had written, synthesized all of them, and arrived at dinner one night announcing he had that pesky speech licked. He performed it for the table, and everyone went completely silent. Spielberg's verdict was that it was Milius's words shaped by Shaw's editing. Then came the filming disaster. Shaw persuaded Spielberg to let him drink before the take to bring authenticity to the performance. He drank so heavily that 2 crew members had to physically carry him onto the Orca and lower him into his chair. The take was completely unusable. At 2 in the morning, Shaw called Spielberg in a panic. He said, "Steven, tell me I didn't embarrass you. Are you going to give me a chance to do it again?" The next morning, Shaw arrived at 7:30 and delivered the monologue in roughly 4 takes. Spielberg later said it was like watching Laurence Olivier on stage. Number 3. In Peter Benchley's original novel and the first screenplay drafts, Hooper dies in the shark cage. The shark kills him. That was the plan, and that's how the story was supposed to end for Richard Dreyfuss's character. Then something completely unexpected happened during second unit filming off the coast of Australia. Documentary filmmakers Ron and Valerie Taylor were shooting footage of real great white sharks for the production. They were filming the sharks attacking a miniature cage with a short actor inside to make the sharks look enormous. During one take, a real great white became entangled in the empty, full-sized cage and started thrashing violently to free itself. The cameras kept rolling and captured spectacular, terrifying footage of this massive shark destroying the cage. The only problem was that the cage was very obviously empty. Spielberg watched that footage and wanted to use it so badly that he completely rewrote the ending. He changed the script so that Hooper escapes the cage at the last second and hides on the ocean floor, surviving the attack. A single piece of lucky real shark footage changed the entire third act of the film. Benchley had also originally written the shark dying from accumulated harpoon wounds. Spielberg replaced that ending with Brody shooting the compressed air tank lodged in the shark's mouth, creating the explosive finale that audiences loved. Number 2. The chain of events that put Steven Spielberg in the director's chair is almost absurdly improbable. Producers Richard Zanuck and David Brown purchased the film rights to Peter Benchley's unpublished novel for $175,000 after Brown's wife, Cosmopolitan editor Helen Gurley Brown, read it and left him a note saying it might make a good movie. Brown later joked that if they had read it twice, they would have realized how impossible it would be to film. Their first choice to direct was John Sturges, the director of The Great Escape, but he declined. They hired a director named Dick Richards instead. Richards was promptly fired after he kept referring to the shark as a whale during development meetings. He just couldn't stop calling it a whale. Meanwhile, 26-year-old Spielberg had spotted the unpublished manuscript sitting on Zanuck and Brown's desk after a meeting about the Sugarland Express. He read it overnight and immediately recognized its similarity to his TV movie Duel. He called it Leviathans Targeting Everymen. He got the job in June 1973. Then Spielberg got cold feet. He was terrified of being typecast as the truck and shark director, so he tried to leave the production for a Prohibition-era film at 20th Century Fox called Lucky Lady. Universal exercised its contractual right to block his departure. Producer Brown convinced him it was the right decision by promising, "After Jaws, you can make all the films you want." Number 1. The mechanical shark failed so catastrophically that it appears on screen for approximately 4 minutes total in a 124-minute film. Spielberg was forced to invent an entirely new visual language of implied terror. With the sharks requiring weeks to rebuild after each breakdown, Spielberg improvised a layered system of substitution. He turned the camera into the shark's point of view, filming from below the waterline, looking up at swimmers' dangling legs. He used the yellow harpoon barrels as a proxy for the shark's movements and strength. He deployed a lone dorsal fin pulled by a speedboat. He brought the camera to water level using Bill Butler's custom housings, placing audiences at the waterline. John Williams's two-note theme became the ultimate shark substitute. Editor Verna Fields was the crucial collaborator. She saw the mechanical shark looked unconvincing and cut any footage showing it in full, using thrashing water and unseen menace instead. She shaped the film's rhythm of escalating dread and won the Academy Award for Best Editing. Spielberg deliberately escalated the shark's visibility in stages. First nothing, then a dorsal fin, then a glimpse of the head, then the full reveal when it lunges onto the orca. Audiences had already built the shark in their imaginations before they saw it. The supreme irony is that the film's most celebrated quality, that Hitchcockian restraint, was never the plan. Spielberg wanted to show the shark constantly. A mechanical failure produced the most influential suspense technique in modern cinema. Jaws remains culturally unforgettable because nearly every iconic element arose from accidents, failures, and last-minute desperation. The improvised dialogue, the hidden shark, the rewritten ending, the two-note score, all of it was born from production chaos. Spielberg didn't set out to make a film about what you can't see. He was forced into it by a mechanical prop that wouldn't work, actors who genuinely clashed, and a shoot so grueling he literally fled the set on the final day. The lesson isn't that great filmmaking requires everything to go right. It's about what you do when everything goes catastrophically wrong. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this movie as much as you do. And as always, you're gonna need a bigger boat. We'll see you next time.